Hello and welcome to another edition of the Hitting the Hardwood podcast, your home for all the latest Minnesota Lynx and WNBA news, analysis, and coverage. Thank you for joining and tuning in to another episode of the Hitting the Hardwood podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Hansen, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Jack Borman from Canis Hoopus, my fellow Canis Hoopus, I guess you could say. Jack, welcome and thank you for joining.
Absolutely, man. I'm happy to be here.
Jack, if you could, let's start by maybe doing a little bit of an introduction to yourself and where people can find you on social media, on find your work and all the above.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the site manager, editor-in-chief of Canis Hoopus. So this is my second full Lynx season, covering the team as site manager, third season overall. You can find me on Twitter at JRBORMAN13. And yeah, all my stuff's at Canis, so I'm not bouncing around anywhere. I grew up watching, the dynastic teams that the Lynx had, and it was super fortunate to be able to make it to all those playoff games and just be able to follow that team pretty closely because Lord knows the Timberwolves weren't sniffing anything good at that time. So it was just super fun to have winning basketball to support in the cities, and has been a blast to cover, just getting to know so many great people and just being able to kind of help build, in my biased opinion, the best outlet for Lynx coverage over at Canis. So certainly it's going to be a really fun season. Obviously we'll get into that, but I think when you compare some of the outlook to this season compared to last season and what it was like to cover it, frankly, it was pretty draining. Like a lot of the losses were just, the same kind of game script, and you can only write the same thing so many times, and you could just kind of feel how badly everybody wanted it to work and change for Sil, and it just didn't happen. So now that they don't have kind of that added pressure, I think it'll be pretty fun to follow what should be a team that's got a really interesting and fun mix of veterans and rookies that we met today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for the listeners who aren't familiar, last year I think was probably, well, we've kind of been last few years kind of introduced to each other. I'm kind of in and out with going to games with living in central Minnesota, but we kind of got introduced to each other last year, and we talked earlier this offseason, I think it was it? Yeah, it was earlier this offseason. Feels like it was a long time ago. Earlier this offseason about
I think
about
it was
me.
like right after the season ended, the Lynx season ended last year.
Okay, yeah. The months and the days and the years are just all combining together. But we started talking about me potentially joining the Canis team, and I've enjoyed not only just working with Lynx stuff with you, but I know I've initially helped a little bit of Wolves stuff and working with the rest of the team there, and I know specifically with the Lynx coverage, it's been a lot of fun to work with you and Leo and the rest of the crew, and I'm excited for what we're gonna do, what we already have done, but what we're gonna continue to do during the season. And I agree. I'm a little biased that I think it is one of the best outlets, if not the best outlet for Lynx coverage, and it's been fun. So thank you for giving me the chance to join the team.
Absolutely, man. We're super happy to have you, and and obviously been a ton of fun to get to know you too. So it'll be even more fun this season now that I think now that you're kind of kind of steering into some uncharted waters a little bit, if you will, with so many unknowns and so many things to find out and cover, which will be a ton of fun.
Yeah. Well, let's go right into that with kind of this team and the offseason so far. I know, I've talked to a few other people in previous weeks' podcasts about the offseason. It's been, for a lot of people, underwhelming. I mean, I think a lot of people came into the offseason thinking that Minnesota would do more than they have. Now, is it good or bad that they've, have been relatively quiet? That is yet to be seen. I mean, looking back at the draft, they were busy on draft night, but as far as acquiring players in other forms in free agency, Tiffany Mitchell's really the only new player, and they did retain a majority of the other free agents. But a lot of people are kind of underwhelmed. They're waiting for Minnesota to make that move, and that hasn't come, and I don't know if it will before the season. And what are your thoughts on the offseason so far? They're not really even including the draft. We'll get to that in a little bit, but how about just before the draft, the outlook of this team?
Yeah, I think just as it pertains to moves and roster moves, I'm pretty surprised that Ariel Powers is still a member of the Lynx. I think in on the record conversations, both Cheryl and Ariel both kind of alluded indirectly to the fact that things may be coming to an end with just those two parties. And I remember AP posted something on Instagram after the season last year, and that was like, that surely feels like a goodbye and not a thanks for a great season, we'll see you next year. And you just have to wonder, like, if the Lynx made trade calls around the league and just didn't get any bites, just considering the contract there. I think that I think that probably prevented them from doing other things that they would have wanted to do. Like if they could have split that contract up into two, whether that be maybe a protected contract and an unprotected contract, to a point where, okay, you can release a player potentially and get some more flexibility to be able to sign maybe not a max player, but a player definitely in that 125 to 175,000 range. So I think that probably kind of lowered the ceiling of what they're able to do in terms of their roster moves outside of the draft. But yeah, I think them being able to bring back Lindsay Allen and Rachel and Dee all on trading camp contracts, I think was good business for them, and being able to re-sign BC on a protected deal, I think was probably good for both parties, considering just you'd hope that BC would be able to play a little bit better this year in kind of a more spread out system, where her 3-point shooting and attacking off the catch will be relied upon pretty heavily. And I think the biggest thing with the Lynx was they didn't do anything to really like restrict their future in any way, which I think is a great place to be if you're not a team that's going to be expected to to compete for a title. And I certainly don't think the Lynx will be expected to compete for a title. So I mean, you just look at their books. Fee is the only player that isn't a rookie who has money on the books beyond 2024. So I think overall, like, if you're a rebuilding team, I think what the Lynx did was smart, and I think they are going to be in a place now where it'll just all be about development, and I think that's going to be fun to watch play out.
You think, you're talking about going back to the Ariel Powers kind of trade, or maybe a lot of people thought maybe she'd get packaged in a deal. Do you think that, whether it was maybe no interest, or I guess, what do you think was, why didn't that work out? Why didn't they, why weren't they able to package a pick and a player, pick and maybe a couple picks to move in this draft? Because it almost seemed like that was inevitable at the beginning of the offseason. It's like, okay, they're going to move something. But that never came. Do you think it was maybe a lack of interest? Do you think maybe this was what they wanted to do all along? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think my opinion on that is, like, I mean, Cheryl is Cheryl. Like, she's, like, I think the writing was kind of on the wall that Breanna Stewart was going to go to the Liberty, even dating back to last offseason. But, because she's Cheryl, still got a meeting with Breanna Stewart, and like she has the respect of the league, and I mean, a lot of players around the league understand that Minnesota really is a destination in the WNBA, and that their facilities are top tier. You get to play for arguably the greatest coach in league history, who also coaches the national team. and, get to play with somebody like Fee, who's pretty universally beloved around the league. And I think that, my view of the situation would just be that if the Lynx knew that they would be able to sign a free agent, as a result of making a trade, I think they would have been more motivated potentially to package the number 2 pick, or, the 12 and the 16, or whatever the numbers were, in trying to be more aggressive to look to get off of AP. But I think that's more of a win now move anyways, just in that, if you're going to have a pathway for young players to play and be able to develop, I think you probably don't want to jeopardize that just to move Powers with 1 year left on her contract. It's just like objectively not great business. And I think the only reason you would have traded Powers would have just been like, you feel really strongly about being able to turn AP into a player or 2 players that you felt would really be able to help the team win now, and also, clear up cap space to be able to sign whether it would be like a Brianna Jones or somebody like that's just like a big name, clearly fits, has a relationship with Cheryl, that type of thinking. So I think it was more than anything just like the cost that it would have been to get off of that contract just didn't make sense, considering what their outlook as a team were, and what the interest level from free agents on the market in Minnesota probably was.
And I know a lot of people too, they thought that Minnesota should try and, everybody's been talking about trade to next year, trade picks for a pick next year, or trade a package for next year. Obviously everybody wanted to do that, and everybody still wants to do that. In a ideal world, that maybe would have taken place, where Minnesota trades the second overall pick and maybe another pick, moves to 2024 and gets maybe one of the top picks. I mean, that's what everybody's trying to do. They want one of those top players that are potentially going to be coming out in 2024, that being Caitlin Clark and Paige Beckers. But I don't think that I think that they, when it comes specifically to the draft picks or even trying to make a trade, I think that they wanted to move, but I don't think anybody wanted to move to 2024. And I don't think anybody even wanted to move to 2025, because you have the potential that some of those players, or maybe even one of those players in 2024, holds out until 2025. So they were of all years to have the number 2 pick or have 5 picks in the draft, it was probably not this one. But I mean, they still got some talented, prospects, and I mean, having coming out of the draft with what they got, I think that, for having not being able to make a trade, I think that, it all worked out for them. But
absolutely. I mean, I think, and Cheryl said it today, like, if you would have told me in November that this is the haul that we would have gotten with our draft class, I think all of us would have been really excited about that. And that includes me too. Like, I'm super excited now that this is what this draft class is. And I think, it's the philosophy that money today is worth more than money tomorrow. And it's certainly worth more than money tomorrow when, if draft picks is this currency, then, money today is certainly worth more than money tomorrow, because Caitlin Clark has not committed to coming out of Iowa next year. And, and I was talking with the great Sloan Martin about this today too, and that, Caitlin Clark plays on national TV every single time she steps on the floor. And that is between the Big Ten Network, ESPN, or maybe Fox and Fox Sports 1 now. I'm not quite sure what the college sports TV contracts look like in the Big Ten. I think they changed this past, in the last year or something like that. But, that's just not the case in the WNBA. You'd have to have WNBA League Pass to catch majority of the Lynx games. And I do genuinely think that a player's name, image, and likeness value goes down once they get to the WNBA, because there are less eyeballs on the sport than women's college basketball, just because of the national television exposure. And frankly, I don't think the league has done a good enough job on being able to capitalize on the rapid growth that's women's basketball has been experiencing. And I think, like you see the Dream owner, acknowledging that on Twitter this week too. Like people aren't, it's not a situation where people don't know that this is going on. And in the summer, like you have to compete with, the NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, getting ready for football season. Like, whereas, during the winter, it's pretty much just like all basketball and hockey. And I mean, it's just so hard to put all your eggs into one basket of team building, like one draft, especially with, not knowing what's going to happen. Like, you could have a situation like what happened to Natalie Achanwa, where like you could have all your eggs in one basket, gunning to get one of 2 or 3 players. And, 3 weeks before the draft or a month before the draft in the NCAA tournament, the playoffs, like someone blows out their knee or someone suffers a significant injury that could hurt your stock and derail their entire draft plan. I mean, I think it's just such a difficult sport to be a general manager in because of those types of decisions that you have to make. And I think what the Lynx did in terms of understanding that they'd have some runway to be able to play some rookies this year and be able to make out with who they made out with in the draft this year. I think, I'm not afraid to be critical by any means, but I think you'd have to consider that pretty good process and pretty good outcome too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you kind of mentioned, this leads into my next question, talking about the draft, and you mentioned the press conference today. That was the introductory press conference for all the rookies that was held at Target Center. Jack, you were there. What do you think of that, and what do you think of well, they did introduce 5. There was 4 there, but the 5 rookies that Minnesota ended up selecting. What was your overall thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was great for me to see another Eagle. And Taylor Sewell, she appreciated my BC shout out there, which was fun. But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that stood out to me about the 4 that really spoke was just how much personality they have and how confident they are in themselves as people and as basketball players, which is really cool to see. And I think that they seem much more like sure of themselves and in what they're bringing to the table than draft classes in years past. And I think that's just because it's going to be an environment where not only can they compete, but there's like a legitimate path to them being able to contribute right away. Like I would be shocked if Diamond Miller and Dorka Juhas were not playing in the first game of the season as pretty significant contributors. And I think that those 2 are absolute locks to be on the roster. Unless something happens during training camp that really pushes the Lynx off of course there. And I thought it was interesting too, like Cheryl Reeve didn't have to say, if you watched our team last year, that we need somebody like Bree Beal. Like that's an aggressive statement to make if you have, a decent amount of doubt that you could cut that player in 3 weeks. So I thought that was a pretty big vote of confidence from Cheryl Reeve and Bree Beal. And I asked Cheryl on draft night, just like how beneficial is it for you to be able to leverage the relationships that you have with Gino Ariema and with Don Staley to get information about Dorka and about Beal or Bree respectively. And she said it was like huge and brings her a comfort level there and their evaluations and the information that they're getting. And for her to pick those 2 players, especially after, conferencing with those coaches, I think says a lot too about some of the brightest and best minds in basketball. There's a 2-way belief in both of those players, which is cool. So, and Diamond Miller, man, she is going to be a riot to cover. She's hilarious. Totally not afraid to be herself and be the life of the party wherever she goes. Had a couple of awesome moments there. There was that, and there was a reporter, I believe, from Roanoke, Virginia, down there near Virginia Tech, that brought the Soul Train nickname from Taylor Soul from Virginia Tech to Minnesota. And Taylor joked that she wasn't sure if that was going to make its way to Minnesota, but it did, and that got a good laugh in the atrium there. So overall, just it was a really fun day, just because I think, you've covered a bunch of these things. Like it can be super dull because there just aren't a lot of personalities involved and everybody's kind of shy and they probably haven't gotten much sleep. They're in their probably third city in 4 days. And, but that was like not at all what the case was today. It was super lively, full of energy and personality. And that's what's going to make it more fun for us this season, which is going to be great.
I think for kind of the first time that I can remember in the last few years, you know, you kind of touched on this a little bit. You legitimately can see where there's a path for rookies to develop on this team, and not saying that that's a knock on the Lynx because they've had, you know, arguably the best starting five ever, you know, during their dynasty years, and they needed veterans to surround them with at that time to continue to put championship caliber teams together. So they didn't need rookies. They didn't need developmental pieces. They needed to win now. Where now they're, you know, they're trying to turn the page, and they, you know, in years past, maybe one, or well, for sure one, maybe two rookies would make the final roster. This year, it could be three. It could be, you know, who knows? Maybe it's four. Obviously, Maya Hirsch is not going to be playing this season, so she kind of is left out of that. But you know, that it's going to be kind of weird. I mean, it's going to be weird to cover this team and see the Lynx in this kind of transition period in the development phase. And I think it's going to be a learning process for everybody. It's going to be a learning process for the fans to watch it. It's going to be a learning process for Cheryl because she's never really had to deal, you know, necessarily with this amount of young players. But with that said, what do you think? What do you think this roster looks like, and what do you think that this team will look like? You know, maybe let's start with at the beginning of the year, but you know, it could progress into, you know, depending on the development of the rookies. But what do you think that this team will look like with the players on the roster and the rookies that are coming in?
Yeah, I think I feel confident sitting here today that the first three will make the team this year. And again, like I haven't gotten a chance to talk to many people. You know, inside the organization since the draft, with how much Wolves stuff has been flying around since I cover both teams. But I just like reading the tea leaves from today and seeing who else is on the roster. Like I think today was just, you know, that Bree Beal comment was especially noteworthy from Cheryl there. But yeah, I mean, if you look at Dorka at 6'4", 6'5", I mean, I'm 6'3", and she felt like she was towering above me. And she, I mean, she's the tallest player on the team. Because Jess is 6'3", 6'4". But you know, like isn't somebody that plays, you know, like it isn't like a Maya Hirsch who's really athletic, jumpy 6'5" that can really get up there, where Jess is more of a bruiser and does a really good job defending down low in the post. Having somebody like Dorka that's more of a true rim protector, I think is going to help. And Milic is only 6'3". So I that's why I think Dorka is going to play quite a bit, unless there's some signing coming down the pipe that we aren't aware of yet. But I don't see that happening. And you think too about the fact, like, we don't know if Kayla McBride is going to be back in time for any training camp with her season over in Istanbul. And if Kayla's not back, you know, then you especially look more at Bree as someone, and Taylor Sewell too, or Taylor Sewell, excuse me, who will have the opportunity to be able to really compete and separate themselves in training camp, just with a lot of other players that are on training camp contracts. I mean, you look at it, the Lynx have 6 players on training camp contracts, and Milic was signed for 90, just how Clarendon was last year. But Clarendon didn't make the team. So if you're looking for like my roster projection, I would say that the first 3 make the team, and Miller, Uhas, and Beal, but that I would not be surprised at all if Taylor Sewell really stood out and earned a spot over like a Damiris Dantas or a Lindsay Allen or maybe even a Rachel Banham, if Cheryl felt like that player would be able to give her more than what some of the incumbent players would be. But I'd say, yeah, like Miller, lock. I think she should probably start on day one. And I think I think you could make an argument that Juhas could start on day one too. If her shooting, especially, if you feel better about that than you do about Jess Shepard next to Fee, then maybe that's a look you go with. But yeah, it'll be pretty interesting to see how we kind of see Cheryl's trust line evolve, because that Didi and Rach have been with Cheryl for a while now. And Alan was fantastic down the stretch of last season too. So I think trying to balance this share of rookies and legitimate vets. I mean, Kayla McBride, Natalie John Wafee, Tiffany Mitchell, those are all great vets for rookies to have too. So it's a great environment for rookies to be able to be in, with how competitive it's going to be and the veterans you have available.
I think that, every offseason you have this, and I know Cheryl has done this too in years past, where after draft night, or maybe even at the post draft press conference, or even the introductory press conference, they all talk about, oh, these rookies have a chance. They have a chance to make the final roster, when that's maybe not legit. This year, for I think maybe one of the first years that I can remember, that's legit. Like these players legitimately have a chance. Yeah.
Yeah, she said it hasn't been the case in years past. She wasn't afraid to admit that.
Right. And I think that if there's any year to kind of do, to kind of take a step back and take inventory of the team, and maybe kind of take a fine-tooth comb of each player in the roster breakdown, this year's the year. I mean, let's be honest, the Lynx aren't going to win a title this year. They're not. Well, I shouldn't say never, but I personally don't think they're going to be competing for a championship this year, right. Which is okay. Everybody goes through that. But, I do think that in order to make this thing successful, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, they really have to take a hard look at some of the players that are currently on the roster too. I guess what, when it comes to the 2023 expectations, do you think that this team will be any better than last year? I'll just flat out say, do you think that at the end of the year, will Minnesota be a bottom 4 team again in the lottery, or do you think that they do make some steps in the right direction?
I certainly think they make some steps in the right direction. I don't know if that means making the playoffs, but I do think that this team will be better than last year, just because with how banged up Sil was last year. I think this version of Fee full go is going to be better than what Sil was last year. And Fee isn't as reliant upon, other players to be successful as Sil was, in the sense that you needed to have really good entry passing, and the Lynx just didn't really have that last season. And so that really kind of puts a cap on the impact that Sil can have. Like it's hard to tell Sil, like, hey, you're the way you're going to get the ball is to go get it off the glass and then put it back in. Like that's just hard to do. Whereas Fee, is going to be such a focal point of everything that they do, and doesn't, need other players to help get her going. And like, that's not a knock whatsoever on Sil. She's the greatest low post player in league history. But yeah, I think that you think about that. You think about the fact that Kayla will be here for the whole year and will be playing, on the first game of the season. She said that during exit interviews last year. And then you think too, just about, this team's going to be playing, I think, a more preferred style of basketball for Cheryl, which is a 5-out, or at least, get bigs in the high post at the very least, and be able to cut and drive and play off of that with a lot of space. And I think that should really help Fee. You think about how much speed Tiffany Mitchell has and how great she is when she can get going downhill. Same for AP. You'd hope that this would be a better year for AP, considering she'll have more space to work. I think it would be hard for this team to be worse than they were last year, despite how much change they've undergone. And at the very least, I think the vibes around this team will be a lot better. And that in and of itself is a huge step in the right direction, because last year was just tough. I think it was tough on everybody. Players, coaches, fans, front office, media, everybody. So yeah, I mean, and two, like you're going to be developing players. Like last year, you were not good, and you didn't really develop any players along the way either with all those losses. So yeah, I think that for sure when you add in the development component, it'd be hard for me to say that this wouldn't be a step in the right direction.
To conclude, I might, if you're okay with that, I might throw some rapid fire yes or no, or just kind of rapid fire questions at you and see what you think. If
Let's
you're
do
okay
it.
with that. All right. Day one is, well, okay, I'll backtrack a little bit.
Wow, hot start.
Yeah.
Hot start.
I had to think about that one a little bit. I guess day one or out of training camp, how many rookies make the final roster?
I'm gonna say 3.
Okay. Do you think that Diamond Miller is a day one starter?
No, but I think she should be.
Do you think what seed do you think that the Lynx will get in the 12-team breakdown of the league this year?
8.
Ooh. This is not a yes or no question, I guess, but who do you think is going to win the title in 2023?
Oh man. That's tough. That is tough. I'd have to say the Aces just because they've done it before. And like team chemistry matters so much. And there's so many new pieces with that New York team that I just think, having the familiarity that they all have with each other and really only adding one piece in Parker, one big piece, if you will, I think, makes it a lot easier for them than having like 2 players come in who are better than your best player. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to matter quite a bit.
Do you think that the rookie of the year in 2023 is on the Lynx roster?
I am going to say probably not. I think it'll probably be Aaliyah, just because I think that like so much of that comes down to how you play in the first 5, 7, 10 games of the season. Like she's going to play a ton. And I just think that like, even if Aaliyah was far and away the best rookie the first 10 games and faded a little bit over the final 30, and Diamond Miller didn't play as much the first 15 and then was awesome the last 25, it's so hard to reverse what people think after the first few weeks of the season in that award specifically, that you're just kind of playing catch up. And but I think like with how much this team's going to want to push the pace, there's going to be so many opportunities for Diamond Miller to score, even in the half court, even if her 3-point shot isn't, where some people might hope it to be. I certainly think that she'll have a chance. But I just think when you have such a clear cut, number 1 pick, it's just, I mean, you look at the WNBA, you look at the NBA, the way that the league promotes the leagues promote their number 1 players are so similar, and it's just so hard to undo that. So who knows? I mean, but then again, like you think about when Crystal won it, or when Fee won it, like not the number 1 pick, like kind of came out of nowhere in a sense in the year that Crystal won it. So who knows? All you need is an opportunity, and I certainly think Diamond will have the opportunity that she needs.
Well, cool. Jack, well, thank you for joining. That's all I have for rapid fire questions for. Well, okay, hold on. One more that now that I just thought of it, in the press conference, introductory press conference, Diamond Miller talked about this. Her favorite reality TV show. She said she's a big reality TV show or reality TV fan. Her favorite reality TV show is Love is Blind. What is your favorite TV show? It could be reality TV. It could be just TV show in general.
I was going to say, if you made me pick reality TV show, I was going to say the Minnesota Timberwolves. With everything that's gone on that side of the house. But I don't know. My favorite TV show, like of all time, is tough. This is like a cop out that I'll give a couple, just because I don't know if I could pick one. White collar is up there. Suits is definitely up there. Man, I like Homeland is up there. Just finished watching that show pretty recently. I thought Prison Break was fantastic when I watched. I haven't watched it in a while.
That's my all-time favorite.
Prison Break.
Yeah.
Wow.
Big
Look
Prison
there
Break
we
guy.
go. Man, I'm so bad at like these on the spot. You have to think back to all these different shows. Like, yeah, I feel pretty comfortable with that top three. I'm probably missing something that, Money Heist. I thought Money Heist was fantastic on Netflix. Probably not actually, I'd probably put it above Prison Break. So I'd say top three, probably in whatever order: White Collar, Homeland, or top four. Yeah. White Collar, Homeland, Suits, and Money Heist.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is because I need to do TV show soon. So you
Yeah,
see me jotting down on
I'm
the
in
side.
that too. I just finished Brooklyn Nine-Nine last night. So I feel you on that. Fantastic show, by the way. So
I'll have to check that out too. Speaking of checking things out, where can people find you once again on social media, on all of your written content and everything else?
yeah, you can follow me on my burner account at Canis Hoopus, CANISHOOPUS. That's obviously our site's Twitter account. But I'm also active on my personal account at Jack Borman 13. And then obviously all of our content at canishoopus.com. It's going to be a super fun season between Leo Mitchell and myself. So and who knows, maybe some more people getting in on the fun too. So super excited and a ton of fun to be with you and can't wait to do it again soon.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I know I talked to you about this earlier, and I talked to Leo about this too. We'll have to do, before the season starts, we'll have to maybe do a Canis Hoopus kind of roundtable and talk about the season. So for listeners, more to come on that. And we will be patiently awaiting the start of the training camp, which is right around the corner, and the start of the season. But Jack, thanks again. Had a blast, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you for joining another episode of the Hitting the Hardwood podcast, your home for all the latest Minnesota Lynx and WNBA news, analysis, and coverage. Thank you once again to Jeremy Rushing for producing this podcast every week. And a shout out to our newest patrons, Katie and Jeremy, who joined patreon.com/Hitting the Hardwood to get all the exclusive perks, coverage, information, news, all the above on there. There's a ton of good content that's posted there that you don't get everywhere else. So please, if you're able to, consider checking that out and supporting this podcast. And I also want to give a little bit of a plug to our weekly newsletter that we're starting. I am starting a Hitting the Hardwood newsletter that will be sent out weekly, and that's free to sign up for. You can find information on Hitting the Hardwood on Twitter. That is at Hitting Hardwood, or you can check out my Twitter account as well. That is M_Hansen 13, HANSEN 13. And you can find all of that newsletter information. You can sign up for it. You'll get it right into your inbox every week. It'll come out every Wednesday. And if you want to get more frequent newsletters, patrons will actually get some Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. With a little bit of an exclusive twist to each one of those newsletters with different information included each time. So once again, thank you for joining, and we will see you next week.